So this is a topic I've been thinking about for some time. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and I started reading science fiction in the 80s. And I remember just loving the stuff that I read. I mean, authors like Asimov, Herbert, Farmer, Heinlein, Niven, Brin, Purnell, Halderman. I mean, great science fiction authors. I mean, I couldn't wait to read more from these authors. They were awesome. Giant worlds, great imaginations, all kinds of good stuff. But then after the 80s, when, new century, the 2000s, I kind of fell off reading science fiction. And I don't know why. I never really thought of why that was. I didn't stop liking science fiction. I didn't go into something else. I still enjoyed it. I mean, I reread a lot of the stuff that I had still. Um, you know, why did this happen? And recently, an article by John Delarose in the Federalist kind of put it all together for me as to why, perhaps, that I stopped reading, in science fiction um, in the 21st century. Now, I shouldn't say I stopped reading. I still read old stuff, but I couldn't find new stuff that grabbed me as strongly as those other authors did. Why was that? So let's look at this article by John Delarose in the Federalist. Indie sci-fi authors are upending traditional publishing, and it's turned into a war. It was only a matter of time before extreme leftist science fiction professionals aimed their fire at the independent author group 20 books to 50K. So I believe that 20 books to 50K is a reference that this guy figured out if he wrote 20 books, the residuals from those books would be enough to keep him to give him 50K a year, which would be enough for him to retire on, and he could just relax and have an easy life. I believe that's what it refers to. So this group has 28 plus thousand members and the largest independent writing conference in the world. The book industry establishment is identity politics obsessed and an angry brigade who seized control of the traditional publishing industry years ago. So this, I don't know why I didn't think of this, but why did I loved reading science fiction. I looked for new books all the time in the 80s and 90s. And then the 2000s, my reading of new science fiction dropped off. I read some of the old stuff. I reread the old stuff. I would look for authors that I knew that I loved during the 80s and 90s. I would read their stuff, but I didn't get any new authors. And it's been, almost 20 years, and I haven't read very many new authors. Now, why is that? Perhaps it's because the traditional publishing industry didn't stop publishing good stuff that I liked. They still published some of the guys like Niven, Brin and Pornell. I mean, these guys are legacy guys. They're going to keep going. Their publishing isn't going to change. But perhaps it's because these, what I would consider good science fiction. To me, good science fiction is not identity politics based. I don't need to read I want to read about a good character. I don't need every character to be gay or everything about LGBTQ issues. I mean, there are more important things than those type of things. I want something that expands my mind and takes me to far off places, and not read about some social commentary about, women's or gay issues or that kind of stuff. I mean, that's not science fiction. That's garbage. So perhaps that's what's happening is, and a normal person, I've never heard of this independent group before today. A normal person, you go to the bookstore, you look at what's on offer there, and nothing strikes your fancy. I mean, these independent guys are not getting in bookstores. They're, they're selling on Amazon. How do you get to see those guys? How are you exposed to those guys unless, if you don't know about them, you're just a regular person. You're not going to find out about them. So let's just go on to this article a little bit more. It's the industry is now identity politics obsessed. I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I had heard something about it, but I didn't know it was that bad. And I mean, I guess looking back at it, maybe that's why I didn't like the books that they were putting out. This 20 books to 50K stayed off the establishment's radar. They kept their heads down by writing. It looks like they're getting some pushback now from the regular industry. Let's read here, the modern history of the establishment of publishing's failures. Running book businesses on the basis of extreme identity politics has failed legacy publishing at every turn. Well, it certainly failed me. The last 20 years, I can't think of any great authors that I have read that have come out, in the vein of, Herbert, Heinlein, Niven, Bryn, any of those guys that have come out in the last 20 years that has been worth reading. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's a couple that I have that I'll mention at the end. There's really 3 authors that I think of. I could mention, but I've only recently stumbled into them, and it was kind of weird how I got into them. So, the last several years, they created an enemy in the culture wars in the form of the Sad Puppies, a group of conservative authors who decided to band together to push for Hugo Award nominations based on what readers liked rather than the elite's tastes. Yes, and from what I can see, the Sad Puppies have pretty much lost that fight, if I'm not correct. They tried, they put forward a slate, then putting forward a slate became, it became illegal, and they pretty much lost that. They just basically changed the rules of the Hugos in order to defeat the Sad Puppies. And as far as I can tell, they've won. I mean, I don't care about the Hugo Awards. I've looked at some of them in the past, and I've seen these books that are getting awards. I'm like, what the hell book is that? I've never heard of that. And reading about it, it just doesn't look good at all. So I'm, as far as I'm concerned, the Hugos are compromised. So and sure enough here, as he says in the article, left-wing extremist gaming of the awards didn't sell them more books. Traditional market share decreased while indie share increased. Well, what do you know? What a surprise! All these books are winning awards, but they suck. Nobody wants to read them, and their shares decreasing, and people are looking to the indie publishers. But the thing is, how do we know who those indie publishers are? Here's a good one here, a great quote. One New York agent told me at a writing conference, "You can't sell anything without LGBT issues in it." Where's the Q, bigot? I don't care about that. I want to read a good, I don't mind a story that's got gay characters in it, or it's got an issue as part of the story, but I don't want, to be hammered every book on the head with LGBTQ issues. That's not of interest to me. I want to read good science fiction. I want to read, amazing worlds. I want to read what happens when you take some sort of cultural event, or some piece of technology changes the way that we live, and how does that change society? Now, you could do a good story like that with an LGBTQ issue, and I'd be very interested in that. But I don't want that hammered into me, and I don't want every story to be the same. To be, oh, what happens if everybody was gay? Let's take that to its, that would be an interesting story once. But if everybody's doing the same sort of thing or variations of it, it's going to get boring very quickly. So let's go down here to 20 books to 50K. So a small group of authors to better their business skills. So it wasn't their writing, it was their business, because they couldn't get published in the regular publishers. They would can their stuff. So let's see here. Annual conference last year, several authors raised their hand if they were making more than $100,000 per month on Amazon. Wow, $100,000 a month on Amazon, independent publishing. That's pretty good. Dozens were making more than $10,000 per month. So $10,000 a month, that's $120,000 a year. That's a good chunk of change. Even with the average wage for a person average wage for a family, I believe, is 40 to 60,000 in the U.S. I'm assuming this is U.S. dollars. So 120 U.S. That's 2 to 3 times what an average family makes. That's a good amount for an author. 20 books to 50K, focus on appealing to readers. That's what I want. What most readers want out of science fiction is escapism and fun. Yes, exactly. The big authors of the past understood this, and that's why we still hail so many of the greats like Frank Herbert, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and Robert Heinlein. Well, I was never a big much fan of Burroughs, but Heinlein and Herbert, yes, two of my favorites. Classic stories have a vision that brings fun and awe to their readership. Yes, modern establishment publishes stories that are mired in literary traps and identity politics in order to oppress elites, but most readers don't identify with these kind of stories. Now, I don't know if that last part is true or not, because guess what? I don't read those stories, because none of them ever grab me, none of them ever interest me. Not the books, the covers, reading the back. I mean, I haven't read them, so I don't know if that's true, but the fact that I don't want to read them, I'm not interested in them, I think makes it true. 20 books to 50K's attitudes that Amazon is a great equalizer. Anyone can go publish a novel on Amazon and make it big without any gatekeeping by literary agents or publishers. All right, here's the group gets its name from the founder, analyzing his self-publishing work and understanding based on market data that he needed to produce 20 books to make $50,000 a year so he could retire in Cabo. So I believe that's like for residuals and everything. So I mean that makes sense to me. Here, look, the group often jokes that they're the most successful authors you've never heard of, and I haven't heard of them. And I haven't heard of, Michael Enderle and Craig Martell. I'm gonna have to check them out. So, I mean, this sounds like a great idea. We want good books. I don't want identity politics based books. I want good science fiction, good stories. So, I'm going to thank John Delarose for bringing this to my attention, and I think I'm going to have to go check these guys out. So I've talked to him on Twitter. He's given me a bunch of names of some guys that I should check out. So let's look at some of these authors that have been mentioned. We'll look at 3 of them. I don't want to get too bogged down here. Maybe we'll look at the rest later. But let's look at 3 of the most successful ones that are mentioned and see what their stuff is like. So the first one here, we can see Michael Anderle. Anderle, I mispronounced her name. So interesting stuff here. Looks like he does. So he's one of the guys who started the group. Looks like he does, what's this? Horseman Gather, Urban Fantasy Action Adventure, Tales of Feisty Druid. I'll have to check these out. I'm not as much of a fan of fantasy, though I used to read a lot as a younger, but I kind of, I prefer more pure science fiction. Cold Case of the Witch, Urban Fantasy. So here's some for Bella's Sister. It looks interesting. I'll definitely have to try one and see if I like his stuff. Who else do we have here? Next, Craig Martell. This is the guy that he founded the group with. So let's see, Craig Martell, Dragon Award finalist for Best Military Science Fiction. Oh, so he writes a lot of military science fiction. So that's more in my vein. I'm not as, I like John Dalamus is pretty good. I prefer more pure science fiction as opposed to military science fiction, because I find the military science fiction is kind of some of it focuses too much on the military, in my view, and it gets kind of boring. Find that, if you read Dalamus' stuff, it's very descriptive of, military actions, and it's not bad. I like it. I've got tons of his books, but after a while it gets a little boring, constant, descriptions of combat, for me anyway. But I'll check out his stuff. Maybe it's different. And as I said, I still like it, just not as much as the more pure stuff. So, Hope is Not a Strategy. That sounds pretty good. Let's see. 4 Horsemen Universe. Not sure what that is, but I'll have to check that out too. Super Dreadnought, Military AI Space Opera. Oh, that sounds pretty good. Scorpion's Fury. He's got a bunch of stuff. It's Metal Legion. Book 1, Book 5, so he's got a whole bunch under that. Gravity Storm, Age of Expansion. So this looks pretty interesting here. Broken Arrow. End Days, Book 2. Alright, so seems a lot of stuff there. Anyway, he's on his way to his 20 books for 50K, that's for sure. And lastly, let's look at John Delarose, who set me on this path. So with this article, so for Steam and Country, Fistful of Credit. So I was speaking to him, and I asked him what if I wanted to get into his stuff, what should I read first? And he suggested For Steam and Country. So that's the one I'm going to check out first about in his series. Fistful of Credits. I don't know if that's that's Stories from the Four Horsemen universe. So that's a different than the For Steam and Country, which I think is steampunk. But I'll have to check that out. John is also writing a comic book as well, so he kind of he's got his feet into both areas, comic books and science fiction. I know I've been, investigating the comic book field a lot more recently, and that's how I became aware of him. But science fiction books are definitely my first love, so I'll have to check him out. So it's been bugging me for a while as to why I haven't been reading as many new science fiction authors as I have in the past, and I think the identity politics is probably what killed it for me, and I didn't even know that was killing it. All I knew was that I couldn't find any new series, any new authors that were good that I enjoyed. So hopefully these independent authors can fill that void. So perhaps you can check out any of those three authors, see if they do anything you like, and get back to me. If you want to, in the comments, if there are good authors that started writing, let's say, this century, 21st century, any time after 2000, let me know in the comments so that maybe I can check out their stuff as well. I just haven't found, with a few exceptions, which I'm probably going to do some reviews on their stuff in the near future. But with a few exceptions, I have not found any authors that I like in this new century. So let me know about that. Also, upcoming on the channel, we've got a couple of videos coming up. A couple of them on some reviews of TV Netflix shows that are science fiction-y or superhero-y in that vein, and more stuff coming up for you all the time. So if you like the content, you're interested, subscribe and like, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.